Start, Mr. McCabe?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Laura Peel. I'm the Director of Information Technology at JWB, and I'm going to be your technology moderator. Committee members and any additional board members, when I call your name, I would like to verify that audio communication is working. Please say present to indicate that you can hear me. Now, please mute your device until you are called on to speak. Bernie McCabe.
Present.
Bob Dillinger.
Present.
Mike McCurrick.
Present.
Rick Butler. Rick, you'll have to take yourself off of mute. There you go. Can you hear me? Thank you. Is Karen Seal here today? Karen, can you hear us? We're just doing a roll call. Commissioner Seal, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You came right in the middle of the roll call. Susan Ralston?
I'm here.
And I don't believe there are any other board members on the call, so,
Yeah, Mr. McCure.
excuse me?
Mr. McCurrick's on.
I'm here.
Yep. So thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to our CEO, Beth Houghton.
You're
Beth,
muted,
we
ma'am.
can't hear you.
You have heard this before. Good afternoon. I'm Beth Houghton, CEO at JWB. The Finance Committee meeting of the Juvenile Welfare Board of Pinellas County is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor DeSantis's Executive Order 20-69 of March 20th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency throughout the state of Florida, given the outbreak of the novel coronavirus COVID-19. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus and reduce risk of COVID-19 illness, we have been advised and directed by the state to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's Order EO 20-69, as amended by EO 20-193, suspends the requirement of the Sunshine Law to have all meetings in a specific public place and to require a quorum to be present in person. This order, posted on the JWB's public notices website, allows public bodies to utilize communications media technology to conduct its business. For this meeting, JWB is convening via Zoom or telephone conference posted on our website, which clarifies how the public may join and participate if they wish. A public meeting notice was published in the Tampa Bay Times on August 9th, 2020, as required by Section 189.015 of the Florida statutes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded on Zoom and YouTube Live. Also, some attendees are participating by telephone conference. Participants are advised that people may be listening who do not provide comment, and those persons are not required to identify themselves. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording and will become a part of the public records of the Juvenile Welfare Board of Pinellas County. Laura Peel, JWB Director of Information Technology, will serve as the technology moderator of the remote participation by JWB committee and board members, JWB staff, presenters, and the public.
So thank you. Permit me to confirm that persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. We are changing it up a little bit. We're not going to go through the board again. So I'm going to start with staff. When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Beth Houghton.
Here.
Laura Brock.
Here.
Linda Leedy.
Here.
Diana Carroll.
Here.
And anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Colleen Flynn.
Here.
Lynn Delator.
Here.
Laurie Lewis.
Here.
Please mute your device until you are called on to speak. Thank you.
All of the materials for this meeting are posted on the JWB's website with the agenda for the meeting, and we recommend that JWB's board members and the public follow the agenda as posted unless we note otherwise. So before we turn to the agenda, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each item on the agenda, and after staff has presented the item, he will entertain questions by members. Please use the raise hand feature in the Zoom webinar controls so the technology moderator may call on you. We'll have public comment before a vote on each action and during the public comment section of the agenda as follows. Laura Peel will call on each person by name or the last 4 digits of the phone number, allowing 3 minutes for comment. And finally, each vote will be taken as a roll call vote. For all participants, board members, staff, and the public, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. And with that, I'll turn the Finance Committee meeting over to Mr. McCabe, Finance Chair.
All right, thank you, Beth. We'll call the meeting to order. First item is a consent item. The minutes from July 9th, 2020 of this committee. There's not much in them. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
There's a second. Come on, Bob, second it. Or somebody.
I thought I approved it. I'll second it. Either one.
There's nothing to comment on, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye. All right, let's move on. Action items. Approved grants management cloud solution cooperative purchase. Laura Peel.
Yeah, so good afternoon again. I'll be presenting this first item to you. So we are seeking the approval of the Grants Management Cloud Solution Cooperative through SHI, working with Streamlink, who is doing business as Amplifund. So as Beth has brought to you all over the last several months, we have had some dissatisfaction with our GEM system, which is brought to us by Mosaic. Earlier in the year, we began to explore different systems. We've used GEMS for 7 years, and we felt like it was a good time to look at what's out there, what options there are, and do some exploration. So staff internally met with about 13 different vendors to explore different software programs. The biggest thing we learned is that there really is no one replacement for GEMS. As you probably know, GEMS has the financial management, grants management piece, and also has the evaluation participant side. So when looking at the new vendors, we really couldn't find one that specialized on both sides, and we began to explore the options separately. So to talk about specifically today, the grants management piece, a team of 5 staff members and 1 agency person from Family Resources were put on the RFQ team. We had brought to you guys the RFQ, which was released in May and approved by our board. And what we did was we began to look at 2 vendors specifically that met the needs of JWB, and also were able to contract with us through a cooperative agreement for cloud solutions. There was a master agreement that was competitively procured and awarded through an RFP through the NASPO association. So we began to look at those 2 vendors. We requested a written request from them, and then spent 2 full days meeting with the vendors and reviewing their products. I'm happy to say that after that was over, the team unanimously sided with SHI, doing Streamlink, doing business as Amplifund. The main reasons were that it required a little to no code. It met all of our requirements, and everybody was really excited about this product. It'll allow us some new functionality that we didn't have in the past with procurements and budgeting, and will allow us to get up to speed pretty quickly, with the goal being, if you approve this, take it to the board for final approval in September, and begin to contract with it, hopefully being fully up for our providers in March so that they can do their budget amendments and reimbursements. I did have a question on the comparison of cost to our GEM system, and it really was hard for me to figure that out, because it's really comparing, an apple to oranges, in that the GEM system required a lot of additional code to meet our needs. It combined both the programs, which we found was not necessarily the best because we really want a vendor that specializes in the area that we're looking for. So although the costs are going to be slightly lower, we feel like this is really the best solution. Of course, year one is always a little more with implementation. But you know, again, we really felt like this is the best solution. So with that, I can entertain any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I raised the question of the comparative cost. And you're using two solutions to accomplish what was previously done with one solution. And I guess the question is it going to cost us more per year to do that?
Yeah, so we looked at the numbers. For fiscal year 20, we budgeted $247,000 for GEMS. Of that, we've only used 151 because we've really stopped doing the enhancements that have been required year over year. Going forward, it looks like in 21, we budgeted 568,000, but again, that's because of additional costs to implement the systems. We estimate to implement the grants management is 114,000, and the participant management, we did receive a rough quote of about 40,000. We budgeted 250 total for that, not knowing the exact cost. So in that, you know, it is hard to compare. It definitely will be somewhat more, but again, we're going to get the expertise from the companies that do, you know, that really specialize in their product. And we're also gaining additional functionality for procurements and budgeting that we did not have in the past.
So you feel it's
The other
worth,
thing I would add, I
you
was
feel
just
it's
gonna-
worth the cost differential?
Well, year one, and I'm just looking.
I'm asking for an opinion. Do you feel it's worth the differential?
yes, and let me kind of fill in a couple gaps. Once we get past the implementation year, we think the cost will be roughly the same as we've experienced. But even so, besides the improvements we expect to see, we were dealing with a vendor that was not very stable financially.
Okay.
And that was what prompted us to move. It had been out there as a possibility, but that moved us into a much quicker gear because we are so dependent upon these systems to do our work. And we were not confident in the current vendor's stability.
Fair enough. Any other questions? Mr. McCurrick?
I guess the questions I have are, you're saying here that it's highly configurable. And when I hear the words highly configurable, my question really is going to be centered around how much of this is I'm going to try to make it the way it is because that's how I do it versus a process change that will enhance the way we do business in that area, in that space. And then that'll then reach back into what costs may or may not be in the future.
Mm-hmm. So one of the biggest things we looked at when comparing the companies was how much custom code would be required. And the other vendor we looked at actually required a lot of custom code to get it, the system the way we want it today. The system or the vendor that we're recommending, actually, it is highly configurable for many processes. Now, we realize going in, it may not meet every one of our processes, but it's also a good opportunity to look at those, kind of get up, with the speed with what is best practice. So we are open to changing our processes to what is best practice for a grants management system. And this system allows for that.
Okay, so that's where my question was heading, was really at, are you going to look at changing the processes, some of the processes, to better utilize the value that you get from the system? And then how does that then tie back into the initial implementation costs and ongoing costs for modification if there need to be?
So Yes, definitely. I would say we're open to looking at our processes to enhance them, to make them better. That's one of the things that this company pitched to us as part of the implementation, to work with us on process improvement. They don't allow you to do a lot of custom code. You can do customizations, but not custom code. And we found that actually to be a good thing, because with GEMS, we found year after year, we were spending, 75, 80,000 trying to make it a system that we thought was perfect. And then in the end, it would turn out that, we're not programmers, and the system becomes so complex, it became almost unusable. So we think this is a better approach. These guys are expert in grants management. That's what they do. And we're really looking to follow best practice.
Good, okay, thank you.
Mr. Dillinger.
Did anybody from the county BTS look at this or have any information about the vendors and their reliability? Or if there was anything in the county system already that could implement or supplement this?
We didn't look particularly with the county, although the BTS supports us, so they've been somewhat involved with this. We actually went to Gartner, and both of these vendors were recommended by Gartner as being able to meet the needs of a funder and a government entity. So that was what we relied highly on in this
If you
case.
talk to Gardner, Mr. Gardner, then what else is needed?
I was just going to add, as far as back to the cost. So we budgeted in the past 250,000, and the grant management side, we're anticipating, irrespective of implementation, about 115. So that leaves us a little bit for the second half. We don't know yet what that cost is going to be, but we're come to the conclusion that once we get rid of the enhancements and the implementation, will probably be pretty close to what we've been spending in the past, is what I'm foreseeing.
Ms. Ralston,
You're on mute.
mute.
I certainly don't want to belabor the discussion, but going back, Laura, you fed into my question. Over the span of 5 years, I know you have a projected 5-year budget. Did you project it out at flat or reduction?
So we did not, we did it flat, and that was based on their pricing model. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull this up real quick. With their pricing model, we do get a 10% annual subscription fee discount. The price does not go up unless our revenues, or well, it could change. If our revenues decrease by 15% or more within the first 2 years, that will reduce it. And then any renewals after the initial term will not exceed 3% unless our annual revenue increased by more than 40%. So based on those numbers, we did not anticipate changes in the budgeted amount.
So it could go up or down insignificantly, but you budgeted flat. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Mr. McCurrick.
This is more for Diana. Diana, how is this going to impact or support the efforts that you have from procurement and other business services?
There's a possibility with this software that we're going to explore, and we got to see some of it during the demo, that right now, when agencies have to apply with us, they have to email their application, and we have a size limitation on that. That's just one nuisance. But with this product, we're hoping that agencies are going to be able to complete their application online, not have the size limitation, have an automated application and evaluation process. That information would be stored in the system. It could be, it could help the transition as you make the award and then move into the contracting process and the budgeting process. So hopefully going forward, it will automate what's a manual process right now and integrate all of those functions.
So if I understand, it'll help you then reduce the overall time frame in which you have to monitor, measure, and prepare for this process.
It'll
And
definitely
it'll also allow you to do a more effective management of those procurement agreements?
It'll streamline the process, not just for us, the staff, but for the agencies when they're applying. Sometimes because of the size limitation with our emails, they're having to submit multiple emails to get the whole application in. So it'll be a little bit more streamlined and smooth on their end as well.
And then one last question, all the functionality that we were just talking about is included in what we're buying. We're not going to have to add any additional cost for it. Is that correct?
Correct. Those modules are included. There's no price difference in adding those.
Thank you.
Commissioner Steele, did you raise your hand?
Yes, I think a lot of my questions have been answered, but the bottom line was I just wanted to make sure that it's easier for our funded agencies and that they are not having to duplicate. I assume as it is now, they have to enter information and they'll have to continue to do that. I'm not sophisticated enough to know whether they could take what they already have and just transfer it electronically to this particular software module. But again, the bottom line is we have probably some agencies that are more sophisticated than others, and I just wanted to make sure that they were going to be able to use this in an easier fashion.
Yeah, one of the beauties about this system is we can take Excel budgets and import them in, and we've included that as part of the implementation, because we're not starting at the beginning of the fiscal year, so we'll be importing in what they have and year-to-date information. So the hope is that it'll be easier. Again, this system was, unlike GEMS, this system was built as a grants management system and caters to that. So we think it will make things easier for our agencies.
Any other questions? Seeing
Diana
no
had her hand
hands,
up.
seeing no hands, is there a motion to recommend this item to the full board?
I so move. I second.
Okay, Ms. McCurrick moves, Mr. Dillinger seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Hey, when I call your name, Finance Committee, please state your vote. Bernie McCabe,
Aye.
Bob Dillinger,
Aye.
Michael McCurrick,
Aye.
Rick Butler. Rick, you're on mute. Let me see if I can.
Raise your hand if you're voting yes, Rick. Okay,
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Seal,
Yes.
thank you.
that it?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, moving on. Approve the non-operating and capital projects request as the documents included with their agenda show that the increase is recommended by our staff to go from 1 million to 1.25 million for this year, and allow each agency to request 2 projects and increase the maximum application request from 100,000 to 125,000. My understanding is that these modifications are proposed to be a one-time only modification due to the impact of the coronavirus on our funded agencies. So with that, who's on this one?
That's me, Diana Caro.
Diana Caro.
But you covered perfectly everything that I was going to say. So I'll just open it up to any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Is there a motion to recommend these changes and move this to the full board?
Move.
Mr.
Second.
Dillinger and Commissioner Seal second. Mr. Dillinger made the motion. Roll call vote.
Sure. So Finance Committee, when I call your name, please state your vote. Bernie McCabe,
Aye.
Bob Dillinger,
Aye.
Mike McCurrick,
Aye.
Rick Butler.
Raise
You're still on, okay, we got the thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Commissioner Seal,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, moving on. The renewal of the agreement with Pinellas County BTS. Before we take that up, for the record, Mr. Dillinger and I are both on the BTS board, and Diana Caro's husband or spouse also is employed by BTS, but neither Mr. Dillinger nor myself have any financial stake in this action. So moving on from there, that would be Beth Houghton.
Very good. The experience we've had with BTS has been excellent and is recommended by Laura Peel, who is really the content expert on this work. You can see in the memo all of the various services that BTS provides for us. The reason to bring this to you is that we've had annual agreements with BTS and amendments. So we've been both renewing and amending, and frankly, it's just unwieldy to deal with multiple, trying to apply one amendment to the renewal and find out where we are. And because we've had a long and excellent relationship, it was the recommendation that we go ahead and extend this relationship for a longer period of time. So the initial term is for 5 years with an option to renew for another 5-year period. The other terms are very similar to what we have now. We have the opportunity on an annual basis to look at the scope of services and pricing. And I would point out this includes a price increase of $3,600 from last year, which, given the total amount of services and pricing, is relatively small. And through the years we've worked with BTS, we've only had one other price increase. So it is the staff's recommendation to you that you approve this contract for the 5-year period.
Any questions? Seeing none.
I move that.
Moved it.
Second.
Ms. McCurry seconded. Roll call vote.
I just want to give it a moment to see, we didn't do this on the last 2 items, just to see if there was any public comment, although I have been watching to make sure nobody's had their hand up. And just giving it a moment, it looks like there are no questions on this item either. So Finance Committee, when I call your name, please state your vote. Ernie McCabe.
Aye.
Bob Dillinger.
Aye, and I confirm what Mr. McCabe said in terms of lack of conflict of interest.
Thank you. Michael McCurrick.
Aye.
Rick Butler.
Aye.
Hey.
Woo! Woo!
I just left him up. Commissioner Seal.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the other 2 items are information or discussion items with Laura Brock. The financial reports for June and July. Laura, anything you want to talk about there?
Sure. I would like to just go over the statements quickly for June, and you have both statements in your agenda packet. There was a revised agenda because the July statements were included twice, so that was kind of removed from that. So let me just briefly go over the June statements first. For June, we're seeing total cash or total assets increased approximately $7 million from the prior year, and that primarily is in the cash and investment area. So changes to the asset side are the other items on the balance sheet are pretty much not changed. Capital assets are changed at the end of the year when we true that up. On the liability side, again, the pension liability and accrued liabilities, those numbers remain constant during the year and then get trued up at the end of the year. So the change would be in your vouchers and your accounts payable. Your fund equity numbers, again, are not changed. And just to remind you that we have a 2-month cash flow requirement. So that's separate on the fund equity side with our unassigned balance of 11 million. And then our excess of revenue or expenditures for this particular month ended is 31 million. So just looking quickly at the income statement, and this is a 9-month period report. So it would be about 75% of the year. But on the revenue side, of course, we're at 99% of budget because the revenues come in November and they're all booked accordingly. The monthly budget is a 1/12 amount. And so you can see on the monthly side, we're spending a little bit less than what was allocated on the program side. But if you look at the year-to-date numbers, our year-to-date actual is 35 million, 600 compared to a year ago at 35.2. So it's pretty consistent with what had been spent in the prior year. And again, well under budget. Budget is at 67 million. So even though we're 3/4 the year into the year, we've spent 52,000. And when you add the other expenditures and non-operating items, we come in at the year at 54% spent on an actual basis. Again, just pointing out on a monthly basis, it's 78%, but pretty close to what we had spent a year ago. Looking at the budget actual on a chart, which sometimes is a little easier to look at, we're clearly under budget relative to expenses and on administrative expenses as well. These are the contracts that had been signed during the month of June, as well as any budget transfers that were made. There was a $75,000 transfer that was made for feeding of Tampa Bay. On the investment side, this is just showing us that we have 58 million in investments and the allocation between the different institutions that our funds are invested. Obviously, our earnings are down with comparison with budget. And so we knew that, and moving forward into the next fiscal year, we budgeted a reduction accordingly. And this shows the allocation between the different institutions, as well as our savings investment pool and our average rate. So moving into July, since we have the luxury of looking at 2 monthly statements, again, we're just showing the increase in your total assets is primarily attributed to cash and investments. So here in the month of July, our increase in cash and investments is, let's see here, $6.2 million and 6.2 increase in your cash and investments. These other numbers that I pointed out in June remain the same, even when you get down into the liability section. No change here in your other payables, accruals, and pension, but the vouchers and accounts payable number increased from, it was 40-some thousand in June, and now we're at 72. Looking at the fund equity numbers, again, these numbers are all constant. The only change that you would see for this particular month is your change in your excess revenues over expenditures. So now looking at a 10-month period report, which is July, which would be about 83% of our budget. Again, making note that all the revenues have been recorded. We're seeing on a year-to-date basis, we've spent on the program side 58% of our annual budget, and all expenditures are at 60%. So looking at that in comparison with prior year, it's still pretty well in line with what we've spent in the prior year. The prior year, year-to-date for 10 months, we've spent 47 million. Current year, it's at 48.2. So I don't see any major fluctuations to point out here. Again, on your
Can I
budget.
ask a question?
Sure.
It looked like there was a $4 million deficit for this year compared to something much smaller the previous year. Am I misreading that? The very bottom line, where it says excess deficiency of revenue over expenditures, 4,060,000, and something is blocking the other number.
Yeah, I know, I can't get this thing here. That's what the budget was. So our budget was dipping into your prior year fund balance to the tune of $4,060,000 on our amended budget. These are your actual. So your actual excess is 26 million. Is that what you're asking?
Well, it looked like the year before was a lot less, but there's some bar that's blocking me from reading the number. But it looked like it was like in the hundreds of thousands. Yeah, the 338. Is that the same comparison?
I'm trying to see where you are on this,
The very bottom line
right?
of the, is
Oh.
4,068,000 versus 338.
One is monthly and one is year-to-date.
Oh, yes. Thank you. This is your monthly. So on a monthly basis, if we take our budget and divide it by 12, we're budgeting a deficit or use of prior unrestricted fund balance of 338, but on an annual basis for our full budget, it's 4 million.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Not really, not really. So we're well under what we've budgeted. So we budgeted 79 in expenditures and our revenues are 75. And so the 4 million is coming from prior year fund balance to balance the budget. But we
So-
obviously haven't spent that, or we haven't incurred that expense.
Right. So my question is on the expenses. You said that we really should be looking at 83% spent at this time of the year. And I see we're only at 60%. So my question to you is, are we facing a projected lapse amount that's in excess of what we've seen in the last several years?
Well, we are seeing a lapse because, again, we're not at nearly at 100% of
Right.
expenditures. I honestly don't know the lapse amounts in previous years to give you this in perspective, but I have to believe that some of the expenditures have been changed because of COVID. So
Right.
some of the expenditures haven't been spent because the programs haven't operated, but then on the other hand, there's been other expenses that have been incurred because of COVID. But you're right, there's going to be an anticipated lapse.
And it seems to me it's going to be significant. We only have, this is July's statement we're looking at. So we only have August and September. So
Correct.
very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know, Diana, if you know what the lapse amounts have been in the past at this time.
Well, the agencies, you must know from the agency's financial reporting and looking for reimbursements, we're obviously down quite a bit. But you can't give them money unless they spend it. I get that. But this is significant.
Right, but we are getting budget amendments. They're coming through, trying to get those processed this month because budget amendments will be accepted through the end of August.
And I do hope that there's some latitude. I know it was always a fight of mine. If it was a staffing situation, I had to lose the money if we couldn't replace that person. But again, I know there's protocol and there's policies, but if an agency is looking for a budget amendment that might go a little bit outside of protocol in order to help them survive, I do hope there's some latitude there.
There has been significant latitude in particular as it relates to COVID.
Thank you.
So, you know, if someone wants to do something very different than what was budgeted for and contracted for, that's different. But if in fact it's in response to what we contracted for with adjustments made for COVID in particular or unusual circumstances.
Thank you. It may not all be staffing.
Correct. We've been exceptionally flexible with that regard. Let me ask, Laura, do we accrue for, I mean, my guess is we're 1 month behind in paying our agencies out. In other words, their expenditures for July, we pay out in August.
Right, so there is a lag in that respect. They submit their request the following month.
Following month, and I don't believe we actually during the year attempt to accrue for that difference.
No, not to my knowledge, but they do submit more often than monthly. So every
Some
weeks.
do, right? Some
Correct.
do. And one thing I would say is that, and neither Laura and I or are especially pleased with this. We have historically laid out our budget, just dividing every line item
Right.
by 12. And the fact is, in many of our programs, our expenditures are higher through the summer.
Right.
So this, even July's statement really only reflects through June, by and large, maybe some of July, but June, and then some of July's programmatic expenses. All of the administrative expenses, but programmatic expenses through June, and for those agencies who do bill more often than once a month, part of July. So the last half of July and August, and this summer with school starting a couple weeks later, that may be even more the case in August. We may have even more for the full day summer programming that we fund.
Well, the spillover could be significant, and I just want the board to sit up and take notice, because this could be a significant amount of spillover to 21 that we don't necessarily just want to sit in an undesignated line item, because according to what happens these next 2 months. So I just want to keep an eye on that.
You're absolutely right. Your overall point was, should we expect more lapse this year? And the answer is yes.
Of course.
Right.
But if we're facing at this moment 60%, we just need to keep ahead on that.
Yeah.
Right.
Stay ahead of that curve, not behind it.
Right, and as Beth mentioned, moving forward in the next fiscal year, we're going to have the monthly numbers more in line with cash flow than just a 1/12 per month.
Right.
But,
Yeah,
but you would still be looking at the year-to-date numbers regardless how you did the monthly budget.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
And here is your budget actual amounts, contracts that were signed in the current month, and your investment performance and allocation.
Okay. If there's no other questions, we'll move on to the discussion of the fiscal 21 draft budget. Laura?
Okay, so let me pull up another document and share. All right, so this was revised and put in your Dropbox earlier. There was some numbers in here that had not been updated, but for the most part, this reports that the property appraisal had certified the taxable values, and it reflects a 7.27 increase. We, of course, budgeted a 95% collection rate, as we pointed out on our previous meetings, which resulted in about a $3.9 million increase in your ad valorem revenues. At the July meeting, the board approved a millage rate of 0.8981 with a preliminary budget of $110,847,000. As spoken to when I met with you all individually, I did point out to you that the change this year relative to the vote is that we need to have a 2/3 vote on the proposed millage rate. So
Right.
that's different than the majority vote that we've had in the past. We did look into whether or not our vacancy counted as a vote, and it does, based on Colleen's research and looking into this that question at a previous time. So it's important that we have a 2/3 vote at the September meeting, which would mean we need 8 people to be there. If for some reason the 2/3 vote does not happen, then we can revert back to the maximum amount would be 0.8950, which would change our budget accordingly. But I'm not hearing that we're not going to have folks available at that meeting. And it is, the governor's allowed us to have that meeting virtually. So I don't think that would be a problem. So if for some reason you or any of the board members have a conflict, we might want to make certain that you can at least make the vote for this particular item on the September trim hearing meeting. So on the attached budget, there's just been some few changes to it than when you saw it at the July meeting. We had a slight increase in the children and family program expenditures. It went from 70,472,000 to 70,005,000, and it was for some GA Foods money that we increased due to COVID. We had a slight decrease in administrative expenditures, and that was due to some projected decrease in IT costs. And then we also had a slight decrease in the non-administrative expenditures, and that was also due to a decrease in our projected internal technology implementation. The results of all of these changes gave us a slight decrease in our unassigned fund balance, which is what balances the budget, so to speak. So I'm not going to go through all of these items. Nothing has changed here. What I just summarized was the changes that have occurred here and the remaining fund balance amount. So we're still at a proposed budget of $110,847,000.
All right, everybody's received a copy of this.
Right.
Anybody have any questions or observations? Seeing none. Okay. Now we'll move on to the Chief Executive Officer's report. Item Roman 5 on the agenda.
I would just want to share a little bit of the work that's gone on in the last month or so since we all met. We are well within our contracting period and the cycle for the year. And so that group have been doing Herculean work to negotiate and finalize contracts with all of our funded agencies. We're not there yet, but we're well into that work, and it's a detailed and time-consuming process. Similarly, we're also in the final phases of detailed agency budgets, where we had aggregate budgets back in May and June, and the budget you just saw is built on those aggregates. We have to get down to detailed line items with each agency and work with the agencies in that regard. And so much of that work has also been done and needs to be then input into our currently into the GEM system by September 30th. Most of the program evaluations that are based on 2019 data and site visits have been documented and have been part of your board packages. I'm not sure if we have any left, but if we do, there aren't very many that you haven't already seen. Given the best knowledge we have, and you may have better, but the best knowledge we have, the COVID risk will remain roughly the same through the next several months. And to give our employees some sense of what to expect and reduce stress to some extent, we have said, barring something dramatic, that we will continue working remotely through the end of the calendar year. So that is our current plan. While we have another 6 weeks left of the fiscal year, at this point, I wouldn't tell you that I have any expectation of further use of contingency funds. Watch, I'll be surprised this afternoon and learn about something, but I don't know, nothing is on my desk at this point. We have attempted in the budget that you just saw to take into account the kinds of things that we might expect for the next several months. That's always difficult to know, but if we knew about it, we incorporated it in the budget. If we don't know about it, we would draw it from contingency funds, and we did budget $1 million in contingency funds for next fiscal year. We did budget also with the knowledge of what the county's COVID CARES program is doing, both generally through December 31st. So that includes both the individual assistance program that it has had ongoing since the spring, as well as a program for nonprofits that they are contracting with the Pinellas Community Foundation to run. And most notable there is that one of the 3 focus areas is food, which is where we've spent the biggest piece of our contingency funding on up to this point. So, you know, we're trying to sort of do that dance and step aside when there are other agencies that are more appropriate and have more funding to do that, and step in when we need to step in. And that's what we've done through the summer, and really since March, we acted very quickly before some other funds were available. We really appreciate the time that you all spent and the thoughtful comments that you made and shared at the strategic planning workshop. Your executive staff and the 2 consultants that we work with on strategic planning, Barbara Morrison Rodriguez and Mary Grace Duffy. We are working to take those comments from you and put it together in a document that will create a strategic plan or a strategic planning document that lays out the board's strategies for the next 5 years. In many cases, the measurable outcomes will be on an annual basis. So in some cases, school success, for instance, that we have been working in for some time, there are certain measurements that are really evergreen. We're always going to be looking at them, and we'll include that information in the document that you see. But others that are newer initiatives will be layered year upon year, and you'll see the first year's outcomes that we expect to see. So for instance, you'll see more of that in the 0 to 3 age, the early childhood development. So that's what I would expect you to see before the September meeting, with our hope that you would approve that strategic plan at that time.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Any questions for our Chief Executive Officer? Ms. Ralston?
One of the comments, Beth and I have a frequent touch base call, and one of the discussions we've had is the staff is really, and I think Beth has just alluded to it, there's so many challenges working from home with children going back to school, not going back to school, figuring out technology. And I consistently, ask Beth, is there something, I don't know what, anything that we can do other than recognize that JWB hasn't missed a beat and is staying up on routine work, as well as dealing with the contingencies and what the community need is. So it's something that I know Beth and the executive team are staying aware of, how people are doing. There's a few staff members, just making sure everybody's okay. But it's something that I do ask Beth pretty frequently as we just have our touch base calls, just to let us know if there's something, and I don't know what that is, that the board could do to let the staff know how much we really do appreciate the juggling act. I know the word pivot is becoming annoying because it's so prevalent now, but it's almost a juggling act for so many people trying to figure out how to work at home, keep up with performance, keep up with accountability. So I'll just toss that out there, and maybe we'll revisit that topic again.
Thank you. Bob?
Just more of a question. It appears that fundraising for the not-for-profits has really gone into the tank. And virtual fundraising, from what I hear, doesn't produce much money. Are you hearing much about whether this is going to severely impact any of the agencies that we fund, since a lot of them depend on these big fundraisers? And I don't know if people just aren't in a giving mood, they're scared, they're worried, or they just really think of being a fundraiser, of mingling with people and seeing the results, et cetera. So I just was seeing if Ms. Houghton had any impact on that or any information.
Well, I hear different things. For some of the organizations that really meet basic needs, I think the philanthropic community is in fact being generous with them because they're well aware that those agencies are doing more and have lost some of the revenue sources that they typically have. The nonprofits that are probably most taking it on the chin are those that also have earned revenue that has gone away, and that are in the arts, where the very nature of, for instance, theater, it's not a basic need. And so for those people who are shifting their philanthropy to basic needs, they may have lost that extra philanthropy, and they're not earning their earned revenue. So among our agencies, the agencies I hear that are probably having the most difficult time are when they have a hit both to earned revenue, like the YMCA's, who have fees for a lot of the programs that they do, as well as philanthropy. So I hear it across the board, and I think a number of those agencies, the PPP helped them significantly, but they're still kind of waiting to see what's going to happen in this next round with the county funds for nonprofits. Those that are in those prioritized categories are going to be obviously in much better shape than those who are not.
Thank you, Beth. Anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Laura, I'd like you to look and see if anybody from the world at large wants to. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Steele.
It occurs to me that I ought to send out to the JWB board the summary of the CARES Act funding that the county's doing. As you know, Pinellas County Community Foundation will be administering about $30 million. And then we also have money going out to the arts as well. So let me, I'll send it to Beth and Susan, the summary, and we'll get it out to y'all so you can see it. Thanks.
Thank you. We've been able to stay in contact with Doug and Cooley and a little bit, and in particular as it relates to agencies that we know something about, and he's called on me when he thought that would be helpful. Thanks.
All right, thank you. That's good information. Laura, would you check and see if any of our friends want to talk?
Yes, I've been watching and I don't see any public comments.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have anything before we adjourn? Okay, seeing none, thank you all for joining, and with that, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.